Browns Insider season finale. Guys, we will not be here for Christmas Eve shows or New Year's Eve shows, obviously. So we're doing our season finale. Zack Meisel joining us. Branson, Wright, as always, joining us as well. The Browns getting ready for the Carolina Panthers. Playoff hopes all but gone for the Browns. Maybe not officially, but they're not making the playoffs. We're going to start, though, with Johnny Manziel because we finally got to look at the guy. And it was not a good one, Zach. He struggled. There's questions about arm strength now. There's questions about his ability to read a defense. That's not what you wanted out of Manziel's first start.
No, and you think about going into that game, all the possible scenarios on what might happen. Maybe he's the second coming of Michael Vick or Joe Montana or whatever you want to call him.
Yeah.
Maybe he's solid, does enough to win the games, kind of like Hoyer did for a while at the start of the season.
Yeah.
I don't know that anyone expected this. I mean, we saw the Browns when they came back in 1999 get blown out 43-0 by Pittsburgh. Ty Detmer, Tim Couch played in that game. I mean, this kind of looked like that. It looked like they were playing in two teams from different leagues. I mean, and Johnny takes a lot of the blame because he's at the center of all of it, but really just the team in general. I mean, we can talk about Johnny, but it was atrocious.
Yeah, everything was terrible in that game, especially against a team that you blew out earlier in their building, moved you to all alone in first place. Everybody was thinking playoffs. At that point, a lot of people were thinking it would be difficult to miss the playoffs, and now they turn around and they lose 30-0 to a team that they should at least be able to hang with, if not beat.
Yeah, everybody was dead. I couldn't believe the defense. I mean, they were challenged. You know, they were told that they weren't that good, and the comments during the week from Craig Robertson and guys like that, you know, you thought they were going to be so motivated for this game. I mean, if the fact that Johnny failed and didn't play that well maybe shouldn't have really surprised us, but to me the big surprise was how the defense played. Yeah. And that's the worst that they played, in my estimation, all year. And you have a combination of Manziel not playing well, the defense not playing well. I think it was about the second or beginning of the second half, and I looked at Bud Shaw and I said, this is boring. I mean, it was like, you know, you're just waiting for something to happen. So definitely not what a lot of us expected, and man, those poor fans that paid that money to suffer through that.
And there were so many potential outcomes from that game, and this was the only one that could possibly have led us to have this many questions about Johnny Manziel, about the Browns' future, and for the fans to be feeling as disappointed and pessimistic as they are.
And Branson, you and I talked before last week's show. We were trying to decide who we were going to pick, and I think we originally both said we were going to pick the Bengals, and then we both ended up picking the Browns. But either way, it was supposed to be a close game. Like Zach said, of all the outcomes, no one thought it would be a 30-point blowout, and frankly, it could have been and probably should have been worse.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I thought it was going to be a close battle. I think when we did say we were going to take the Bengals, it was going to be a close game, maybe 3 or 7 points. But again, just the way those guys came out, and here's the last few games of the season. You have a remote chance of the playoffs, and you should be playing the same way you played, especially during the middle of the year. And it just wasn't there. And funny thing is, it was the same way the team went out last year. They went out with a whimper, and what is this, deja vu all over again? Hopefully the coach is not fired, though.
Yeah, we'll see. You never know with Jimmy Haslam. You think that they wouldn't go through that again, but nobody thought Rob Jasinski was going everywhere until they got to Pittsburgh last year. Going back to Johnny, though, I think everyone kind of looked at Johnny and said, okay, he's going to at least spark the offense. We saw what he did in Buffalo. Now, you know, there's going to be these moments that make you scratch your head and say, what is he doing? But the guy's going to spark the offense. They're going to get some touchdowns. You're not going to have a situation like you had against Indianapolis where you get 2 defensive touchdowns and still can't generate any offense. But the exact opposite happened. I think if you would have asked me, would the stage be too big for Johnny Manziel? Personally, I would have said no. But it was.
I think when the Browns made the switch, the thought was, Hoyer's been so bad the last few weeks, the rest of the offense, if they play okay, it can't get worse than that.
Yeah.
Clearly, that was incorrect. And I think the things that everyone knew Johnny could do well, when you say spark the offense, when he can scramble and get out of the pocket and look to make plays, he did those to an extent. We saw him evade some pass rushers. We saw him make some throws on the run. Didn't complete those throws most of the time. But I think it's the down-by-down kind of just the status quo that, you know, those are the questions. Can he maintain the offense every single play. You know, if he can make a great play on 3rd and 15, that's fine. But if you're getting into 3rd and 15 every single time, then that's just going to spell doom for your offense.
And his success in college, you know, he saw a lot of man defense, and he was able to scramble when receivers are able to get free. But it was a zone defense by the Bengals. You're going to see heavy zone from Carolina on Sunday. And I'm not going to say you're going to see the same thing that you saw last week, but there's a chance it's going to be similar because you have to be able to throw those balls. You got to find that window, and you got to throw that ball in there. Manziel wasn't able to do that, and the Browns are going to find out, is he going to never be able to do that? So these next few games, they'll find out what they have in a quarterback maybe for the future.
The other thing we saw, too, is the Browns put together that awful drive in the second quarter. But they did get into the red zone. They did get into field goal range. And that's something where Johnny's got to learn. Sometimes 3 points is fine. If you can get 3 points, that's okay. You don't need to force the ball to Travis Benjamin. And it's one of those cases where you kind of learned that NFL defenses and guys in the secondary are really fast. And I'm sorry, it wasn't Travis Benjamin, it was Taylor Gabriel.
Right.
Taylor Gabriel's no Mike Evans like he had at Texas A&M. He's got to learn, take the 3 sometimes.
And those are the things that the more you play, the more you learn that. Those are the kind of things where it's been one game.
Yeah, exactly.
That'll get better, you would think, as time goes on. I think it's the rest of it that you kind of wonder, and yes, it is still one game, no matter how bad that game was. But you do wonder, can this guy command an offense? Can he find the guys he needs to find defensively, or pick apart the guys defensively and read these defenses? It was just so abysmal for 1 week that we're left here with these questions.
And now Mike Pettin kind of indicated that maybe 3 games would be enough to evaluate Johnny Manziel. That doesn't seem like a real vote of confidence because, I mean, look, we saw 13 games of Brian Hoyer this season, another 3 last season, and it was still tough to get a read on him until the last probably 3 or 4 games. Is 3 games really going to be enough to evaluate this guy?
It's going to have to be. I mean, that's the games that they have left. And I think the reason why he said that, because they'll have to make a decision, what are they going to do as far as the draft? Or are they going to make a deal with some team so they can get in position to take a quarterback, you know, somebody that they think that can lead them? So if there were 4 games left, he would have said 4 games. If there were 5 games, he would have said 5 games. If it was 1, he would have said 1 game. So this is what they have, and they have to find out in these next 2 weeks, is Johnny Manziel going to be the quarterback for this team?
And this team won 7 games. They were 7-4. And if Hoyer wasn't the reason that they won those 7 games, he wouldn't be the reason that they are where they are now. I mean, there is talent around him, and there's good coaching, and there's something there. So a quarterback can obviously take you from decent to elite.
Yeah.
And I think they do need to figure that out sooner rather than later because you can't go through a whole nother year of, is Johnny the guy, is he not? Do you have Johnny looking over his shoulder at someone else? I mean, it's enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a perfect world, right, they would go into next season feeling like, okay, let's give Johnny more time. And maybe have a veteran behind him who's not Brian Hoyer, a veteran who's willing to be a backup. But if he goes out and plays like he did on Sunday, if he does that against Carolina, and if he does that against Baltimore, and that's not unrealistic because those are good defenses, you're in a real bind.
Yeah, you don't have time. And as I said, you know, you only have so many games left. If they don't find out, or if there's still questions after this season, or what we're going to do, and they don't draft a quarterback, then you have to start a season with Manziel. You have a good defense. I mean, they have some injuries, so probably an excuse for how they played in the past 2 weeks. But can you think how that locker room would be if Manziel had played horrible, then he's the starting quarterback next year, and your defense has been playing balls out, and it's like, you know, wow, you know, we're going to go through this again. So they have to make a decision in the offseason if he's not the guy.
Yeah, if he plays poorly the next 2 weeks, they finish 7-9. That's a very different feeling in the locker room after you were 7-4, feeling on top of the world. The culture finally changed in Cleveland. You have to do something to instill confidence in that locker room. And I think that's why these 2 games are critical, win or lose.
And the other thing, look, with Johnny Manziel that we're starting to see, and we knew this going in. So he goes out and he plays horribly. And then you have people like Merrill Hodge scrambling to say, I told you so. And you've got people like John Clayton calling him, Johnny Flop. And then you have this Pam Oliver story that comes out about guys not giving him high fives. All these little things that, you know, maybe they're accurate, maybe they're not, but they start to pile up. And now you've got to deal with all of that. We kind of knew that was going to come with the Johnny Manziel circus, but After a performance like that, it makes it a lot more difficult to have to hear these things.
It's stuff he's dealt with his whole career. I mean, he dealt with it at Texas A&M, whether or not he showed up to Peyton Manning's football camp. Some people said he was hungover. Other people said he slept through an alarm clock. I mean, it's silly things like that he's dealt with that are probably a much bigger deal to the media and to the fans than they are to the people in that locker room and to Johnny himself. That's going to come with it. I mean, I think any star quarterback deals with that. Any person with as much hype deals with that. And it's just the nature of the beast. And what he can do to silence that and block all that out is play well.
And he deals with it on the field. After every sack, linemen are coming up to him doing the money sign. So it comes with the territory. If you're the guy, you're a Heisman Trophy winner, you're supposed to be Johnny Football, the criticism along with the hype comes together. So he's used to it. And as he said, it motivates him when people doubt him.
Is that something, though, okay, we kind of know Johnny can deal with it, or we think he can. Is that something that wears on a locker room, though? Again, if he's struggling. If he's winning, they don't care. But if he plays like he did Sunday and guys have to answer questions all week about, well, Pam Oliver reported this and Bernie Kosar said this, I mean, is that something that wears on a locker room?
I think so. I think winning does cure all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll take some time. I do think guys can get sick of it. I know Nick Swisher's rah-rah act with the Indians grew old really quickly when he was hitting 210. But they make the playoffs in 2013, and everyone can accept it, and it's fine. So I think winning and losing really solves a lot of that.
Let's talk about Bernie Kosar. Obviously a Browns legend, but he always hasn't had the greatest relationship with Browns front offices. Essentially says that it's the organization. That is why this team can't turn it around. Mike Pettin today said it was a little bit dramatic that he said that. Are either of those guys correct? Is there a right or a wrong answer to what Bernie Kosar said? Should he have said what he did?
When Jim Brown was let go basically by the organization, it was a sad day for Cleveland. I mean, Jim Brown is Cleveland Browns. And the same thing with Bernie Kosar. He's Cleveland Browns. And I'm hoping at some point that they'll be able to mend whatever issues they have and he could get back into the fold. But until then, you're going to have comments like this from guys feeling that they were slighted for some reason. They should be a part of the group. And because even if, let's just assume this was true, and if Bernie was working for the Browns, you would have never heard about this.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much truth is in it, but it just goes to, hopefully at some point that they'll work something out.
And Mike Pettin said it, nobody was saying this stuff when they were in the playoff chase. This is something that's coming out in week 16. This team's essentially done. They're in a tailspin. And now they're hearing this stuff. Is there any legitimacy to that?
It's easy to gang up on them when they're down. I mean, if you're unhappy with the Browns regime, then don't hold your breath because as history has told us, every year or two it changes.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it'll be the case with this regime. I don't think it really matters. I mean, Bernie can say what he wants to say. We've heard so many different opinions about Johnny Manziel, about the Browns, and Mike Pettin's decision to turn to Johnny Manziel. And it's funny. It's unbelievable that we're having to talk about all these different analysts and personalities having these opinions after one game.
Yeah. I mean, that's just it. This was they played a big game against Buffalo and they lost. All right. Then they played a big game against Indianapolis. They lost a close game. Josh Gordon makes a catch. Maybe they win that game. It would have been Billy Cundiff kicking the field goal, so who knows. But maybe they win that game against Indianapolis. This was really, of their last three important games, the only one where they just completely laid an egg and completely didn't show up. And not to be a complete apologist, but they were in that game with Buffalo, who's turning out to be very good. They were in that game with Indianapolis, a team that we know is very good. I mean, you can kind of chalk that up to growing pains a little bit.
Don't forget, early in the season, every single game they played came down to the wire.
Yeah.
So it's not like this is the first egg that they've really laid. Well, Jacksonville too. But
Yeah.
okay, this is the second
We've all tried to forget the Jacksonville
This is
one.
the second egg that they've really laid. But in a 16-game season, that's going to happen. And again, I think people need to have patience. The NFL is so right now, what have you done for me lately? You have to kind of relax and gain some perspective and look at the big picture.
You brought up the Jacksonville game. Doesn't that seem like so long ago?
Was it this season?
Right, just so long ago. And as you said, they were 7-4 at one point. The Browns are looking good. Hoyer, I even said that he's probably the best quarterback in the division.
We got that on tape somewhere.
Exactly. So, and then all of a sudden things have turned. And I think you can point to the injuries on defense. I think that's finally caught up to them. I mean, they had some earlier in the year, and they were able to play without them, but I think now it started to catch up to them. And with the offense, the bad thing is the offense went stale and the defense went stale at the same time, and that's a bad combination.
And if we take a step back, look at what we're comparing it to. I mean, Bernie could have made these remarks about the last 15 years of Browns football. And anyone could have, about every single quarterback that's been in there.
And we have.
I think we have.
But I think it's easy to do it now just because Johnny Manziel has the hype he has. The Browns made this critical decision when they were in the playoff hunt. I mean, that's going to happen. But even if they finish 7-9, this is the best season they've had in years.
Yeah, it would still be a disappointment, though, considering where they were after that Cincinnati
Certainly.
game. I think what's most surprising about that, because you guys both brought up Jacksonville. You look at Jacksonville, you look at Buffalo, you even look at Tennessee, a game they had to come back to win. The MO is always, if you can create pressure, teams that have a good front four or good front seven seem to be able to rattle the Browns. Cincinnati didn't seem like that team, and that's what seems so strange about this game. It was kind of going against the things that have caused the Browns problems. And again, this was a team you beat, 24-3 in their building, and then you turn around and lose this game.
But look at the injuries they have on offensive line, and they've gone so long being able just to put guys in and out different positions and able to still maintain. But again, these injuries have started to catch up to them. Well, not started, they have caught up to them. And I think one of the things going into the offseason is just to add more depth, because you have to be able to replace guys to step up, because the NFL, you're going to get hurt. That's just the way it goes.
I think it's showing they have so many undrafted free agents. I think that's showing too. I think you're relying on guys without a lot of experience, without a lot of hype coming in, and I think it's, like you said, it's the depth question.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're going 4, 5, 6 deep at cornerback and along the defensive line, I mean, it's really tough, and it's definitely wearing down on the defense.
Yeah, and I mean, personally, I like a guy like Taylor Gabriel. He's been good this year. Again, undrafted free agent. Maybe the string's running out on him a little bit. Your baby backs, Isaiah Crowell, Terrence West. Maybe they've hit that wall a little bit because they haven't been very impressive the last few weeks. And that's kind of why things are falling apart. But then that depth being tested. Let's get to that, because Joe Hayden, we don't know his status. K'Wan Williams, we don't know his status. You're looking at Pierre Desir, maybe starting to get more snaps. He got a bunch of snaps in this last game, of course. Just more areas where you have to fill in.
Maybe you see a reason why they had so many defensive backs. Was it 7? Which I thought it was way too many. But now with these injuries and you have all these guys that you brought in, so now you're going to see what they can do.
It was funny. We talked to Pierre Desir today in Berea, and he said he had never taken a snap before and faces the Bengals, lining up against Mohamed Sanu, who's a very legitimate receiver. And Desir was like, I went in there and I was very nervous. Like, I was hoping that I was just not screwing up.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that they drafted to be a project in, what was it, 4th round.
Right.
So here he is out there taking snaps against Sanu, and now he's going to be thrust out there against Carolina. When you look at the Panthers, who knows who's going to be playing quarterback? Could be Cam Newton. Could be our old buddy Derek Anderson playing quarterback.
That's what I hope it is. I hope it's Derek Anderson.
Yeah, and he's beaten the Bucs twice, right?
You know, it's good storylines.
This is a team that's 5-8-1. They're fighting for a division title. They're fighting for the playoffs. How big of a challenge is that the Browns are going into this? And maybe they can say they're still in the playoff chase. I don't know if they're going to make that argument or not. But the Carolina Panthers are right there fighting for a division title. How tough is that to go on the road and play a team that's desperate?
With a rookie quarterback coming off a game you would love to forget. That's what I'm most interested to see. They can't possibly be as lethargic and listless as they were this past week, I think. So I'm interested to see what Kyle Shanahan's game plan is. You would think he's going to mix it up a little bit because last week did not work. How is Johnny Manziel going to come out? I mean, Carolina still has a good defense. I know they lost some weapons on offense. Steve Smith's not there anymore. The questions at quarterback are certainly prevalent because Cam Newton presents a whole new challenge for the Browns if he's healthy. So this is a tall order. And this late in the season when the Browns might be thinking, all right, we're probably out of the playoff picture, 2 games to go. I've got a vacation planned in a couple weeks to some island. It's probably easy to start thinking like that when you know you don't really have something to play for. And Carolina, on the flip side, doesn't have that problem.
I think a lot of the veteran guys that have went through those terrible seasons with the Browns, I think they're going to have some pride going into this game because this is their chance to have the best record they've ever had, as being a member of the Browns. But Carolina, they're going to be into it, especially if Newton plays
Yeah.
and after the accident he had, and I think that's going to inspire his teammates and inspire the crowd. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting. But offensively, they have to get the running game going if they're going to help Manziel at all. And if he gets behind like they did against Cincinnati, and he's playing catch-up all game, and I think it just opens up more possibilities for mistakes. So they definitely have something to play for. And if not, and they play the same way they did, I'm sure we're all going to get on them on Monday.
And like you said, yeah, an early lead is critical because the Bengals took the ball right down the field with some help from some Browns penalties, scored a touchdown.
Took 7 minutes.
Next thing you know, it's 10-0, 17-0.
Could have been worse. Could have been worse.
Sure. And the Browns didn't really have, they tried to establish the running game, but at some point you kind of got to cut ties with that because you're down by so many points.
And that's going to be hard because Carolina's looking at that tape from last week. They're saying, okay, Johnny, go ahead and beat us. We're going to put 8 guys in the box. We're going to focus on stopping these running backs because we don't believe that you have the arm strength to come down here and beat us.
And as I said, their zone, their defense, they play a lot of zone. And they're going to look at that film and say, okay, Cincinnati played zone. We do it very well. And Manziel's going to see that. So he has to be prepared. Or I should say Shanahan should definitely have him prepare what he has to do on Sunday.
What did you guys think of Kyle Shanahan on Sunday? It seemed like we didn't see a lot. Was that a result of kind of Johnny Manziel starting slow and maybe he was a little surprised at what he saw from Manziel? What did you guys think?
I think part of it is when you make a midseason change, it's hard to just completely scrap the playbook and cater to Johnny's strengths. I think Johnny has to be able to adapt to a pro-style offense. Can't just run around and find his receivers. He's not going to have Josh Gordon one-on-one and can just throw the ball up to him. It's an adjustment, and that's why you can't judge it after one game just because everyone has to make adjustments. Shanahan's going to have to look at that tape and see what he has to do differently, see how he can play to Johnny's strengths better. I don't think it was a good first week, I'll tell you that. There were some questionable play calls. There were some, a lot of questionable decisions by Johnny too, but I think everyone needs to be on the same page and regroup and learn from what went wrong, which was just about everything.
And just to add to that, sports is a game of rhythm. And you have a new quarterback in there, so the rhythm's going to change. So it's going to affect not only the quarterback, but the offensive line and the receivers, the cadence, and so many things that's going to be different and take an adjustment. So no matter how much you're going to practice, things are going to be a little different. But you are a pro. And if a quarterback gets hurt in a game and then a quarterback comes in later on, you have to make adjustments on the fly. So they're going to have to do the best they can, with these last 2 games, and they can't. Basically, they're going to have to show more heart than they did on Sunday, and they definitely have to do that against Carolina.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about the run defense. Jeremy Hill just
what does that talk about?
Defense looked like they turned it back to week 8 or whatever. When they started to turn this defense around, it peaked against Indianapolis. They played probably their best game of the season, and I'll own this. I predicted that the story from that Bengals game would be the improved play of the defense continuing. Didn't happen. They reverted back to that terrible run defense that we've seen all season long. Andy Dalton was not good in that game.
No.
The Bengals still did whatever they wanted to do. Jeremy
Hill even said himself when he jumped into the stands and the Browns fan kind of pushed him back, he said, that was the best stop someone made on me all day. Right? That's the truth.
And going back to the injuries with Phil Taylor. Phil Taylor in that Cincinnati game, he played balls out. I hate to use that word, but he did, and they missed him. And again, you got to get guys healthy, and you have to have some depth to help that defensive line.
Yeah, Jabal Sheard, kind of one of those underrated injuries too. He's out there playing, but the guy's not 100%. He was probably having his best season, honestly, as a Cleveland Brown, and that certainly hurt that he hasn't been 100%.
Do you think he'll be back next year?
Man, I don't know. That's tough. They have so many holes to fill. And like I said, I thought he was playing well before he got hurt. He's a guy that, if he gives you a good number, I think you keep him around. What do you think?
Oh, I would. I would definitely keep him around, but I wouldn't be surprised if he left. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
All right. I always ask for predictions. We don't hold anyone to this, obviously, because it's still so early in the week. But I haven't thought of a score yet, but it's really hard for me to pick the Browns after what we saw last week in Johnny Manziel. Yeah, I feel like you've got to see something from him before you can say that a team he's quarterbacking is going to win. So I am going to go with the Panthers. I know that. I don't know a score. What do you think of Branson?
Oh, I'm going with the Panthers this week. I'm going with the Ravens next week. And unless there's some big change,
a lot of money signs
unless there's a big change with injuries with either of those teams, I'm sticking with the opponent. And I'm going to predict my score. I'm just going to it won't even be close. I'm thinking 20-7.
Ooh.
That's kind of there are a lot of questions here. Number one, does who quarterbacks for Carolina? I know it's not going to change your opinion.
Right.
But does it change the score at all?
No, it doesn't change it at all.
Okay.
Still 27.
I think the Browns' defense will play better. I don't think they have a choice. I think they're embarrassed by what happened last week. It's hard. How many points do you think Johnny Manziel can lead this offense to? How can you have confidence and say he's going to lead them to 2 touchdown drives? That's hard to say. I'm taking Carolina. I think something like 24-13, something in that neighborhood.
Defense scoring one of those?
Yeah, at least.
If this team finishes 7-9, and Zach, you said it, that's still one of the best seasons in years for this football team. But if they finish 7-9, considering where they were back on November 6th, how do you grade this season? Is it a success still? Does that bring the grade down based on where they were and based on how they finished?
I think it's a success, but I think there are a lot of incomplete answers.
Yeah.
I think it's good that you at least turned the tide, made people forget about these 5-11 seasons that happened every single year, and just built on something. You identified some players, guys you never thought would contribute, like K'Wan Williams or a Taylor Gabriel, guys who could be a part of this team for the future, like Isaiah Crowell. I mean, they've done a good job identifying some talent and some pieces, some building blocks. There's still a lot. I mean, this team, given what we know is coming back next year, they could be 4-12 next year. They make some moves, find a quarterback. Wow. They could be 12-4.
Especially when you look at the schedule this year, you got to factor that in. They played a very easy schedule this year.
Yes, and that's what a lot of people haven't brought up. They had a favorable schedule, and they struggled against teams they should have beaten, shouldn't have had any problem with. Coming back with Tennessee, which was great. But why were you in that position in the first place? And there were a few games like that. They put themselves in positions they shouldn't have been in. But you asked for a grade, right?
Oh, yeah.
If they finish 7-9, so if they finish 7-9, I probably would give them a C. Yes, an improvement on the past records they've had, but you can't discount them falling in the last part of the season because it's real similar to last year. And of course, there's the injuries that they've had, and then you have to look at the organization, the draft picks they made. I mean, they made those 2 first-round picks. I don't want to sound like Bernie, but how much contribution have they made? In my estimation, when you have an early first-round pick, that player is to play right away. He's an impact guy. He's in the game. And they haven't had, at least in this past draft, that's not the type of guys that they selected.
Right. If they finish 7-9, I like the C answer because you don't know how much better you really are set up for next year than you were coming into this year. There are so many question marks on both sides of the ball, and the biggest one is at quarterback.
I think there's 2 types of 7-9 right now. If it's 7-9 and you play 2 more games like we saw against Cincinnati, that kills you. But if it's 7-9 and you show me something against Carolina, you go to Baltimore and you make life difficult for them because they could be playing for a division title that day. Show me something in those 2 games, even if you lose them. Show me some fight. Johnny Manziel, show me something. Don't have a 23 quarterback rating. I think that's a very different 7-9 than if they just limp to the finish, like what we saw last year. So I would say probably a C or a C+ is where they belong based on where they were, where they are now. But at least, again, do something in these last 2 games to give people hope so that we're not thinking back to those Christmas Eve Pittsburgh games where they were losing 43-0. All right, that'll do it for Browns Insider. Full season in the books, full-ish season. We will not be here on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, so that'll do it for us all season long. Thanks to Branson, Wright, Zack Meisel for handling tonight, and of course thanks to Mary Kay Cabot, Tom Reed for being here all season long. Colin Toke, Dave Pekowitz doing some production for us behind the scenes. I'm Dan Labbe. Thanks for watching.